Hey everyone, Duke Nukem 3D here with another mask in my collection, and as the title suggests, yes, I do have another Akron-Tissot mask in my collection. This is the second one in my collection, not counting the La France post-war industrialized AT that Moulage loaned me for study, which will be returned to him sometime later this month. But anyhow, before I get into the history of this, which I've probably already discussed a million times over, but I will again, how I got this was really quite astonishing. So this example was on eBay for a buy it now listing of around $60 total or something like that, and nobody in the community spotted this thing just because of the atrocious photos and label given to the listing. Like, it was called World War I gas mask bag, and it only showed a photo of the bag itself. But if you actually clicked on the listing and looked through the photos, it did come with an Akron-Tissot. And so why this was done this way, I have no clue. But some person whose senses were a bit keener than mine at the moment managed to snag this, and he had read through my Tissot mask development thread in the U.S. Military Forum, and he was basically, hey, this person knows a decent bit about these, he studies these, so why not resell it to him? And so after about a month or two of saving up and waiting, me and Moulage secured this mask for a grand total of just below $330, which, again, isn't that bad of a price considering the rarity of these masks. I should remind you all that the fact that I have, three in my current possession is practically unheard of these days. It's most big collectors are lucky to have just two at most. I can only think of two other people that have had two in their possession at any given point in this community. But anyhow, enough flexing my clout. Yeah, this was an extremely chance thing to happen to me, that someone trusted my reputability on these masks enough that they were like, hey, I'm going to sell this to you. And it was like, okay. So enough about that. More onto the history now. The Type B, the Akron-Tissot Type B, was the first solidly molded gas mask in American history, possibly even world history, because prior to the Type B, gas masks, or such as the Type A or the American Tissot, they were assembled out of a flat sheet of calendared stock gum rubber or some other type of rubber that was basically cut into a specific template and sort of patched together into the shape it needed to be, whereas the Type B was different. And I know they tried a bunch of different molding techniques for this mask, but the main one they did was dip molding, where they had an aluminum form with the shape of the face blank that was simply dipped into liquid rubber to where it would accumulate a sufficient enough thickness, which at the time was about 2 millimeters, and basically it was semi-cured. The harness tabs were located and cut out in the design. They basically attached all the tabs and the stockinette layer, and then they pasted a reinforcing strip of rubber around the edges to reinforce the stockinette, and they cured the whole thing in dry steam before the face blanks were shipped out from either Goodyear or the B.F. Goodrich Company over to the gas defense plant in Long Island, New York, where they were given the final assembly. Because while these masks were developed by W.C. Gear under the instruction of the Bureau of Mines within the B.F. Goodrich Company, these masks, B.F. Goodrich and Goodyear only made the face pieces and the hoses, and pretty much all the rest of the components were made by other various companies, such as the angle tubes, where most of them were made by the Stewart Die Casting Company, or the Stewart, God, I can't remember the name, the Stewart something or other Speedometer Corporation. I can't remember the full name. I think it was Stewart Williams. But anyhow, that was just typically how it was back then. And the Akron-Tissot was officially contracted or officially announced for testing on June 11th, 1918. Now, believe this covers both the Type A and the Type B, and they were tested here and there throughout rear areas of France. They did not see actual frontline duty. They did not, go into the Western Front. They were pretty much reserved to rear areas, basically, areas for testing, and not really at the front lines. And so, as far as I know, no ATs really saw service and actually saw combat. They were all either used for training post-war, or they were used for testing during wartime. And so, I've stressed plenty about how the Type B is one of the most advanced designs of its period, and it could have been so much better had a few things been changed. But again, it's not really much to talk about. I've already gone over all that plenty of times, so let's get right into the kit. So, starting with the carrier, bump the camera, we have the typical M1 chest haversack here, and this is the later type, which seemingly is designed to accommodate these late Tissot masks, because if you can compare it to the normal older ones, like this one that came with my Type A Akron-Tissot, it is significantly shorter. And then also the gusset on the inside, if you open up the snaps here on the older carrier, there is a much smaller gusset, which seems to be folded inwards and riveted to the corners there. But if you open up the carrier I have with my Type B here, you can see that the gusset is much taller and covers a lot more, probably to protect against any rain getting inside the carrier and so on and so forth. You have the typical waxed cotton cord that would retain the carrier around the chest. Nothing to see on the front. I can't tell if there was any person that wrote their name or unit or anything like that on there. If they had, it's completely faded by now. And then you have the neck strap, or the carry strap, which can be lengthened for carrying in rear areas and then shortened to carry it up on the chest in the ready position. And really not much to see externally. Looking inside the carrier, you should see how free of rust all the hardware is. I was actually amazed at the condition of all the metal hardware on this AT. So you can see, hopefully you can, the spring down there, the canister support spring, is completely devoid of rust, which most of them typically are kind of rusting nowadays. It also came with this anti-dimming stick for Tissot type masks, which is, again, a specific accessory that actually lasted well into the 1930s with the M1 series masks, which is kind of strange, but whatever. It's all there and complete and very good condition. A little bit of paint chipping and a little bit of stains, but, you know, it's in remarkably good shape for being well over 100 years old. Now onto the mask itself, which, again, as you can see, it is balled up like a used napkin, as is the typical example of how these masks are. Just the way these masks would be stored, basically just crushed inside the carrier. The reason that Moulage's Type B looks so good is because his is a post-war industrial one. It wasn't stored anywhere where it would have to be balled up like this, like an M1 chest carrier. His was stored in a big trunk where it is sort of balled up around the edges, but the overall facepiece retains its shape. Whereas this one is completely imploded in on itself. Before I get into the face piece too much, let's talk about this canister here, because this actually, first off, I should also mention how completely devoid of rust this canister is. It is extremely rare to find World War I canisters that are this clean. Like, legitimately, the only rust I have is like right here along the edge, and just a few little specks, and I doubt it's even penetrating from the inside out as they typically do. But this canister is interesting because, I don't know if you can see on camera there, I'll try and maneuver the mask carefully. I don't have to worry too much about tearing this hose because it's pretty much fried. You can see that it's stamped L right there, which is very interesting. I did not know that there was a Type L canister, and to the untrained eye, this would just be a normal Type J canister. I believe that I need to look into it more, but I believe the Type L here is a bit heavier than the Type J, which means that they did probably have more filtering ingredients inside than the Type J, because the whole purpose of the Type J was to reduce breathing resistance and, you know, have a lighter canister, because there was a huge spacer inside, which pretty much reduced the amount of filtering ingredients by half of like the earlier canisters. But this one seems to be a significant bit heavier, so they probably increased the amount of charcoal and other ingredients inside just for a longer filter life. And you can also see right here that it is stamped made by the Hero Manufacturing Corporation, which also was one of the companies that assembled masks aside from the gas defense plant in Long Island, New York. And then also you have this patch of fabric tape right there, which is very common on Tissot masks. This was used to indicate the soldier it was issued to, and not really much to say there. You can see the inlet valve on the bottom almost entirely has all of its tin plating left intact. Like, it's very rare to see this as well, where the inlet valves are completely, you know, they're spotless and they're shiny and all that. I'm completely astounded with this, and if the rubber were not petrified on this, I would easily say that this mask is fully displayable and is just near mint condition, just because of how good all the metal is. And the reason it probably lasted this long is because the original seller of this mask that had it on eBay, this came from Nevada, so I would imagine the dry climate didn't do much for the rubber, but in terms of the metal hardware, it did wonderfully at preserving it. The hose, as I mentioned before, is completely petrified and is broken up into several hard segments, which are, there's plenty of crumbs rattling around inside, as you probably could hear. Not much to say there. And you can also see these little white gobs around the ends of the hose, and that is not glue. That is actually melted rubber, which is like plushed out from beneath the hose, and it's making everything look very crusty. So you can see the angle tube assembly here is very nice condition, very minimal missing paint. The flutter valve guard has absolutely no rust on it and is perfectly fine. I'm again amazed at the condition of all the metal hardware on this mask. And you can see that the flutter valve is 2/3 of the way intact, but it is very fragile and loose, and it is on the verge of breaking off, so I'm not going to bother with that. The gum rubber band, which had previously covered the wire on the angle tube assembly here, is mostly completely deteriorated. As you can see, it's dry rotted very thoroughly, and it is stuck to the assembly there. But there is a chunk of it missing right here where you can hopefully see. Again, my camera is obstructing the light, so I'll probably angle this up a little bit. You can see that there is the double looped wire retaining the angle tube in place, and there would be cement basically gluing this rubber band on. It is quite shocking how there's no tape over or under the wire. They just wired the angle tube on and covered it with a rubber band, and it's as simple as that. You can also see the markings on the facepiece. You can see an AT for Akron-Tissot, 44B, which is the mold number, a number 44 mold for a Type B facepiece. And then below here is 1845, which I believe might be some sort of date or batch number. I'm not entirely sure. The serial number would be stamped along this side, but as you can see, the mask is completely balled up, and I'm unable to see this. You can see the size 3 stamp on the forehead of the mask. Another interesting thing to note is that this Type B has black markings. It is not common to see Type Bs with black markings. They are always, aside from the serial stamp on the side, the AT and the mold number and the size stamp are always typically red. You can go ahead and check out the reviews of Moulage's post-war La France Type B, where it used a wartime facepiece, but it's more common when it used those red stamps. But this one is black for whatever reason, so I'm assuming it may be due to either a different manufacturer. It could be because obviously both Goodyear and BF Goodrich made these facepieces, or it could be that this is just an earlier facepiece. Again, I don't know. Also worth noting here is the damage between the eyepieces, which I've referenced at several points, is just being a thing that the Type Bs kind of do to themselves. You can also see little remains of adhesive from a repair plaster that was once applied between the eyepieces, and I've actually not seen any Type Bs that didn't have this particular damage between the lenses, so that's very weird. The harness is a bit in shambles. It's overall intact, but as you can see, the cross strap is completely torn through, but other than that, it's all present, and there seems to be a wide variety of materials they use to make these harnesses, because this harness seems to have been patched at some point, or it's just very strange. This is a very strange example of a harness, just due to the weird combination. You have this red banded elastic, and then you have these weird nondescript patches of brownish black elastic. It's just weird. You can see a little bit of the interior of the face seal. You can see where the rubber is chipping away, exposing the thicker cotton reinforcement for the harness tabs. You can sort of see how the harness tabs are assembled there, where there is a base layer of thick cotton with another thick cotton tab over that, and then a stockinette tab, and then over that stockinette tab is the main outer layer of stockinette. You can see where this main outer layer is overlapping the stockinette tab for the harness. And also something that I didn't notice before is that the lower harness points on the Type B are angled slightly upwards, which again is actually a design feature that US masks typically had, where the lower harness tabs were angled upwards. And it's just interesting to see that the first fully molded mask was the first to do that concept. Just a lot of neat things that were employed first in this mask that served generations to come. And looking inside the eyepieces, you could sort of see the Tissot deflectors on the inside. It is very difficult to see, and this, before anyone asks, no, I am not going to restore this, so you can hold that comment now. This mask is completely rock hard, and you should all know that when a mask gets to this point, it's really not worth attempting to restore it, especially something this valuable. I am not going to attempt to open it or restore it, or just try to make it more malleable in any way. It is more valuable to me in this condition than any other. So that being said, there really isn't too much else to see externally. It is, again, very crumpled, and it's just basically a taco at this point. So not much else to say about that. And again, I'll probably keep you updated about anything else I learn about this mask, and just if you have any questions and things of that nature, I'll be happy to answer them. And I'm very, very thankful to the kind user who snagged this mask before me and was willing to resell it to me and trust my judgment on these masks. Again, you know who you are. I'm very thankful for this, and I hope to document this mask as much as possible in the coming future, and I think I've covered pretty much everything I wanted to say. So, that being said, I'm Duke Nougat 3D. If you have any comments, questions, corrections, or concerns, drop them down in the comments below, and I'll see you all later.